Time now for our Wall Street Week daily segment. The question at the heart of the SEC's suits against Coinbase and Binance is which crypto assets are securities. Tim Massad, former CFTC chairman, spoke earlier with Bloomberg's David Westin about whether the lawsuits launched last week are the best way to get to regulation. Take a listen.
They finally brought cases alleging that crypto trading platforms have to register as securities exchanges and that most of the tokens they're trading should be classified as securities. Now, this is consistent with what Chair Gensler has been saying, but, they've finally done it. And in the case of Binance, they've brought some additional allegations, essentially on manipulation, mishandling of customer funds. And those really reflect the fact that these crypto trading platforms aren't observing standards like we have in other markets on protecting customer assets, on preventing fraud, on prohibiting conflicts of interest, for example. And that's why, we really do need stronger investor protection standards at these trading platforms. The question is, are these lawsuits the best way to get us there?
Before we get to whether it's the best way to get us there, how strong a way is it, period? Even if it's not the best way. I guess as a lawyer, I'm asking you, how strong is Gary Gensler's case that, in fact, these are securities under the Securities Acts as they exist now, and I guess under what is called the Howie Test?
Yeah, I think it's very strong. All they really need to prove is that at least one of these tokens is a security. Now, and I think, they've made allegations about a couple dozen across the two cases. There's really allegations about a couple dozen tokens, many of which are the largest trading tokens after Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I think the case is very strong.
You were, of course, chair of the Commodities Future Trading Commission.
Yes.
Is this, you got to be fish or fowl? I mean, can something be both a security as well as a commodity, or does it have to go one way?
David. It can be both. And that's something, it's an excellent question, David. That is something that people don't understand. Let me give you a simple example of that. The chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission has said Tether is a commodity. And he's right, because there are futures contracts traded on Tether. Anytime you have a futures contract traded on something, that something can be classified as a commodity. But if Tether were to pay interest, it doesn't today, but if the issuer of Tether said, we're now going to pay interest to holders, that would make it a security. So it could be both. Now, when it's both, then both agencies are involved in regulating it. So that is something people often don't understand about this issue of security versus commodity.
Tim, let's come back to the issue you raised. Is this the best way to handle the situation? There's been an awful lot of talk up on Capitol Hill about legislation to really address the question of regulation of cryptocurrencies. Thus far, nature abhors a vacuum. Maybe Washington does as well. Would it be better if, in fact, Congress stepped in than have the enforcement actions of Gary Gensler?
Well, I've suggested that it would be great for Congress to direct the SEC and the CFTC to basically promulgate standards that would apply to the crypto trading platforms today as they exist that would improve investor protection. So we wouldn't require restructuring them immediately. And we could do this while we fight out these classification issues. I'm not saying the SEC is wrong. I think these cases are very important. And I think, as I said, they've got a very strong case. But I do worry about the time it will take to litigate these cases. Now, Congress, so far, hasn't been able to agree on a path forward. There have been different proposals. There was a recent one by some of the House Republicans that I thought was very creative, that goes to this question of maybe we could classify these tokens initially as securities, and then over time they become commodities. But it's very complicated. And I'm skeptical that Democrats will support that, particularly as we move into an election year. So, I'd like to see Congress step in here. In particular, Congress needs to designate one of these agencies as the authority to regulate what we call the spot market in things that aren't securities, like Bitcoin. We don't have any federal regulator doing that today. But I am skeptical that will happen in the near term. So, we may be in a situation where these cases get litigated out and we'll have to see how long that takes.
Tim, let me ask the ultimate question. Why do we need regulation? What is the evil that we're trying to protect ourselves from? Is it for consumer protection, as you just referred to, or is it systemic risk?
Well, I think it's both. I think with the stable coins, it's potentially the kind of systemic risk, or at least prudential concerns as we have with banks, meaning with stable coins, because they are a payment mechanism, you could have a run like you have a run on a bank. And that's why we need standards that ensure that the reserves that stablecoin issuers hold are properly invested in very low risk assets and cash. With the other types of crypto tokens that aren't backed by anything, I think it's really investor protection concerns. And the issue there is, look, people can debate the merits of this technology, and people can say, well, gee, is this really useful at all? Shouldn't we just let it burn? I don't think that's going to happen. And so my attitude has been, you've got to put in place reasonable investor protection standards, ensure integrity in these markets, transparency in these markets, and then we'll see, whether the market values these tokens. I think the other thing that would do is it would take a lot of this kind of speculative air out of the sails. It would reduce the sort of casino quality that we've seen in this sector if we had better investor protection. One of the big issues in these platforms is there can be wash trading, meaning essentially people are trading with themselves, or even the exchange is trading to promote, to push up the volume or price. We've got to stop that. So we need better investor protection, and then the market can decide, what's the real use case, what's the real value of these things.